Hi. Thank you for joining us today. On behalf of Randonneurs USA, we're excited that you're joining us, and we appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. We also appreciate the opportunity that Philadelphia Bike Expo has given us to share our community with your community. And so we're really excited to be here. All right, the title of our presentation is Randonneuring, the Art of Going Long. So if you do some rides and want to push what you can do on the bike, Randonneuring is for you. What we've done today is we've actually put together a panel of, as you see sitting here. And I'd like to, Mr. Bean is not a randonneur. I'd like to introduce our panel. First person we have is Deborah Banks. She's the Regional Brevet Administrator in Randonneurs USA, previous Vice President of Randonneurs USA and on the Board of Directors, and as well as also a recipient of the American Randonneur Award. Thank you, Deb, for joining us. Our second panel presenter is Lisa Charlebois, who is a part of San Francisco Randonneurs and has been a member of our organization for many years, and is also the founder of Hummingbird Fuel. Our third panel presenter is Nigel Green, who is a part of New England Randonneurs, a previous board of director of Randonneurs USA, and also membership chair of our organization. Huge. Come on, Nigel. My name is Dawn Peach. I'm the current vice president of Randonneurs USA on the board of directors and the founder of Inspired Movement. We have Jake Casson. Jake Casson is a previous regional brevet administrator of a region in Randonneurs USA and also a recipient of the American Randonneur Award. And finally, we have Emily O'Brien, who is also well-connected, who is the founder and owner of her bike, sorry. Dill Pickle, I'm sorry. I had a brain of Dill Pickle gear for all of you that, yes. So we're excited to be here. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about randonneuring. How many people in here have heard of randonneuring before? Awesome, great. Come on, raise the roof. All right, we're going to kind of explain to you what randonneuring is and then differentiate that from other types of rides, which include Grand Fondos and racing. We have some time. Emily and Jake are going to do a gear talk. They're going to actually talk about their bikes and some of the gear that's important to use in randonneuring. We're going to explain to you how to get started and join our community of randonneuring, talk about what a randonneuring event is, and then we're going to end with a question and answer. Okay. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Deb.
Here, we'll do this. Oh, do you want to just, there we go. Official.
Right, but yeah, I love seeing this. All right, good afternoon, everybody. I think it's because I have the lowest randonneuring number here. We'll get into that. Or the oldest person here. I got asked to talk about the history. So, what was that? 4405. And my partner upstairs is 887.
Ours are
Emily, lower?
3597.
Oh, wow.
There you go. So the first randonneuse is a woman named Jennifer Wise, and she's randonneur number 1. And everybody that has joined the organization since then has gotten a number. I was told today, I think, Jonathan, you said that, or maybe it was you, Josh, we're in the 17,000s, right, which is amazing. That's a lot of people that have dipped into the sport, but generally there's about 35, almost 4,000 people that actively participate, year in, year out, year in, year out. I started in 2007. When did you guys start?
2006.
Okay, so there's some history here up on the dais. What is randonneuring? We define it as long-distance, unsupported endurance cycling. I like to think about it as expeditioning on your bicycle. It's fully self-supported, so that means on any given ride, your job is to follow the course, get from point A to point B to point C and the finish within the allotted time, and take care of everything. Mechanicals, eating, sleeping, peeing, pooping, helping other people, dealing with the rain. Whatever it is, that's within your time limit, right? So that's what I mean by expeditioning. You need to be fully self-supported and get from point A to point B. It is a lot of fun. We love it. And the other thing about it is that camaraderie overtakes any kind of competition. The sport is started with competition, I'll get to that in a second, and it still has some competition in it, but the camaraderie and the idea that you might be riding in the middle of the night and it's pouring rain and you get a flat tire, and the 3 other people that you're riding with don't just blow you off and say, see you later. They stop and they help you and you get going, right? All tides lift, or all boats lift the tide, whatever that is. But you get the gist. The idea of camaraderie in Randonneuring is huge, and some of the friends that I've made through Randonneuring over the years are my dearest, closest friends, and it's because we've had these tough challenges that we've come out on the other side of. It's fantastic. I mean, I think that's the most important part about Randonneuring, at least for me. We'll cycle back to that a little bit later on. Okay, on to a little bit of history. Back in the day, in 1891, the very first Paris-Brest-Paris was held. It was a race, not a Randonneuring event. It was a race. And this gentleman, Charles Tarrant, won it in 71 hours and 27 minutes. Pretty fast for the day, given old steel bikes and maybe wooden rims. I mean, I don't know what they were riding on, but it's not what I ride on these days. So in 1901, the race continued. PBP continued on as a race. And in 1901, a man named Charlie Miller was the first American to ride in PBP that raced it and won the race with a winning time of 56:40. So it's all about the race. And we now use Charlie Miller as one of the awards based on how fast you do Paris-Brest-Paris. That's why I called him out in this. In the 20s, Audex Club Parisien took over the idea of this event and said, let's include it as a tourist event. Let's let everybody, local people, ride their bikes and see how well they do. And so the race and the Randonneuring event happened at the same time. It was concurrent. And the idea then, too, was to also raise the number of people that were riding and engaging in it. And in 1951, this guy, Maurice Diot, did the course record. No one has beaten this record. That's from the 50s, so it's standing a long time. And his PBP race was 38 hours and 36 minutes. That is really frickin' fast. I don't know that math, but somebody does it, what that speed might have been.
750 miles in 38 hours.
PBP is 750 miles, and you have 90 hours to do it as a randonneur, and he did it in under half that time. Pretty fast. Okay, then in the 70s, 3 Americans rode PBP, and it was no longer a race then. Those were the first people that rode it as a Randonneuring event. And if you notice, it was pretty quiet from the 20s until the 50s, and that's because of World War II. And then the whole race idea started to lose people. They didn't have very many people that were coming to race, and that's because it's a long time, and there were no race teams like there are now. The way we see the Paris, the way we see the Tour de France now, which is somewhat of a spin-off to this whole event, which I'm not going to go into that deep dive. But there were no race teams. There were just people that decided, I'm going to go obliterate myself riding around Paris and France. Okay, so come back up to the 70s. In 1975, there was a group in the United States called International Randonneurs. ACP, Audax Club Parisien, kind of became the mothership. They manage PBP, they managed those brevet cards that everybody would get. They would set up the course, set up the controls and all that stuff. And it was really the biggest game in town. We call it the queen of all the randonneurs, and it's because it's the first, and it's the one that's most known, and the one that's most participated in. And it's sort of like the grail when you get into this sport. If you decide that those longer distances are for you, then what you want to shoot for is the Holy Grail, and the Holy Grail is Paris-Brest-Paris. Okay, so before RUSA was started, there was an organization called International Randonneurs, and it was out here on the East Coast. And so you would send by mail your numbers of what rides you had done and what your times were. I mean, it was really old school. I guess that's the best way to put it. And the gentleman that ran International Randonneurs started to get inundated because randonneuring in the United States really started to come up. There were a lot of people that got really interested in the sport. And IR, International Randonneurs, really couldn't kind of handle the influx of people. So there became a bit of a split, and there were a number of people that had started some long-distance riding, Boston, Montreal, Boston, by this woman, Jennifer Wise, and her husband. They are RUSA number 1 and 2, and they got the wild idea to create Randonneurs USA. Now, my club is out on the West Coast, Davis, and we had a lot of people that would come to be able to get to PVP. San Francisco didn't exist at the time. There are now 4 adjacent clubs, but none of those existed at the time. So everybody came to Davis, and we sent a lot of people to PVP. We also sent Bill Bryant, who is like our grandfather, if you will, of randonneuring in the U.S., to the East Coast, and he, working with a number of other people, formed RUSA, Randonneuring USA. Okay, so the original RUSA members and regions were like the 13 colonies. There were really only, a handful of them. And today, Randonneuring USA has how many regions? 51 regions in 32 states. Like a place like California, I think there's 7 regions alone in California. You can imagine why. And when PVP used to be the only 1,200K in town, we now have 1,200Ks all over the nation and all over the world. So the sport has really grown, not just in the US, but all over the world. And we have people that fantastically can travel all over to ride in any other country in the world. It's been an amazing thing, and I'll stop there.
Okay.
Oh, this is mine too. Jumping into Rando vocabulary, we talk in acronyms and in short stuff. So there's a lot of terms because it's the French, and the French have a lot of rules. And so brevets, populaires, permanence, the flèche, the dart, a grand randonnée are all types of events. That's all. It's just a different kind of event. And we can go into the details of those later during the Q&A, et cetera, if you want, but that's just one whole bucket of terminology. Then, when you do an event, you basically go from a control, which is a stop, point A to point B. They're usually 35 to 40 miles in distance, and you stop there. And in the old days, you used to have a stamp and a piece of paper that was your passport, basically. That was your proof of passage. It meant that you got to this place and then you moved on. They still use that in Paris now for PVP. You still carry what we call is a brevet card. But lo and behold, technology has taken over, and we now have what we call electronic proof of passage. So when you ride your bike and complete a course, for a lot of RBAs, you just send them your completed course. It's on Strava, it's on Ride with GPS. We match it. And this is the course I laid out. This is the course Lisa did. She did it within the time frame. Boom, she gets credit for the course. So, and RUSA, of course, means Randonneurs USA. Moving on, anciens and anciennes are people that have completed Paris plus Paris. But it's a little bit of bragging rights. It's kind of a nice thing. Again, French. And then an RBA, which is very important, being one, is the Regional Brevet Administrator. And all that means is I'm the person that organizes all the events that happen in my region. And this year, I'm organizing 19 events and a 1,200-kilometer Grand Randonnée in September. Come on out. I would love for you guys to be there. It'd be great. And then, of course, didn't finish, didn't qualify, didn't start, was disqualified, or HD, which is hors delay, which means I finished the ride but outside of the time. So every ride that we have has a set time limit, and you either are in the time limit or you're out of the time limit. And then finally, that last slide is all this terminology: super and ultra Randonneur, K-Hound and R12, P12, Rusicup, SR600, blah, blah, blah. Those are all names for trinkets. We ride for trinkets. We suffer and ride really stupid long distances for $15 trinkets and bragging rights. Stickers. Yeah.
So Deb mentioned some of the different sort of events that we do, and just to be 100% clear, these 3 rides are not the same. So Randonneuring versus a Grand Fondo versus racing. I think it's super important. Deb mentioned the time limits. There's a time limit on every brevet, right? We're going to use the terminology now. Now that we all know it, we're going to start to get into it. But it's not, when the results come out of that brevet, the results are published in alphabetical order. There is no first, second, third place. So if you finish a brevet within the time, congratulations, you have completed it and you get credit. So it's competitive, but not in the sense that you're competing with someone else in the ride. It's competitive against you and the clock, and that's it. So if racing is your thing, then knock your socks off, but that's not exactly the spirit of our rides. A Grand Fondo is great, but we're not supported, right? There's no water tent, there's no, sweep of a wagon or anything like that, which, again, that's fantastic on a Grand Fondo. You will not find that on a brevet. And one big distinction there is that a brevet costs about, what, $10? $10. Yeah. So if you've gone to do a Grand Fondo, you've probably noticed how expensive they can be. That's because we're not offering you all the same bells and whistles. So we can talk more about these sort of 3 different events, but just wanted to kind of clarify that. And then as far as what is Randonneuring, as probably not the youngest, but the newest to breveting, I'd only started this about 3 or 4 years ago. I think it's the best kept secret in cycling, so we're trying really hard to break that because I think it'd be amazing if more people knew about it. But it is self-supported endurance cycling. And I want to be clear, we say endurance, but rides start at 100 kilometers or 62 miles, and that's called a populaire, right? And those are really fun, super social. In San Francisco, I ride with the San Francisco Randonneurs, and we have a picnic at the end. It's a whole vibe. It's fantastic. So not every ride has to be this big, long sufferfest. That said, if you're super keen on that, we go all the way up to 1,200 kilometers and more. There's one that goes London, Edinburgh, London, and that's 1,500 kilometers. There's a Seattle to San Francisco, that's 1,700 kilometers. I mean, there is an endless amount of riding you can do if you like riding your bike. 1,200 seems to be kind of the sweet spot as far as long rides go. And as I mentioned, it's not a race, but it does have a time limit. And that time limit's great because when the clock starts, when you start the brevet, it just helps kind of keep you moving, right? Everyone, have you ever stopped to have a coffee and the next thing you know, you kind of can't get going again? Well, when the clock is ticking, it does definitely help you get back on the road and get going. And Deb mentioned the sport that has a root within France and Italy. So that's where it started back in the 1800s. And it's a great community of cyclists. And I think that's the coolest part is that when you're a randonneur, you're part of this global community. So if you like traveling for different events, there's a brevet all over the world. And it doesn't always have to be 1,200. You can go ride in Italy and do a 300K. So with all that said, let's talk about what rando bike makes sense, because I think this is a big question a lot of people have. Like, oh, this is really cool, but I don't have, XYZ on my bike. So Jake and Emily are going to walk through what a randonneuring bike is and how you can sort of make one.
Thanks. Hi, I'm Jake Casson from the Boston, New England region. And the first thing you need to know about gear is that you don't need to have a special bike. You need to have a comfortable bike that you like and that you can ride for these distances. But it doesn't need to be any particular bike. We have people that do these on, mostly it's road bikes, but we have people complete these on Bromptons, on all sorts of different things. Obviously tandems, recumbents, everything. Velomobiles. So here is what you need. You want to go to the next slide?
Sure.
Thanks. You don't need a whole lot. So I'm just going to go over what you actually do need. You need a way of navigating. because these are unsupported, you can't expect that someone else is going to be putting out arrows or something else. And because they're going for a long time, it really helps to have two methods of navigating just in case your phone dies or your GPS dies. So we used to all be cue sheets, and now we are GPSs. A lot of us have phones that are mounted to the bike. I have a nice cue sheet holder up here, so if it's a longer ride, I'll probably have both. Again, just in case. Sometimes people like to have their phone and a standalone GPS. So that's one thing you definitely need to have. You need to have, obviously, ample food and water. You want to look at the route beforehand and figure out how long is the maximum distance you're going to have to go between controls, between stops. Not all controls are going to be at a place that has food, so really do take a look at that carefully. Most of the time, it's somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 40 or 50 miles at most. You have to go without food. But occasionally, especially at night, you may be going longer. So make sure that you have water and food for that distance. Because that no one's going to be bringing you that stuff on the ride. So that's usually the reason why people have big bags. They can put those that sort of stuff in there. Obviously, you need to have basic tools, pump, pack stuff, and you need to know how to use it. You can't call someone and expect them to come and fix your bike or give you a spare wheel. So you don't need to be a super mechanic. A lot of people are not super bike people that build their own bikes. They just like to ride them. But everyone that really does these rides and does it for long distances has a good idea of, all right, if I get a flat, I can fix it by myself fairly quickly. I know how to make minor adjustments on the bike. If something's really rattling, maybe I have a zip tie to fix that. So that's things you definitely need to have. And you also need to have someone who you can call, because you definitely want to call the organizer if you can't continue, so they're not they know they can take you off the list. But the organizers, they're busy. Usually it's one person. They're not going to be able to come and get you. They're certainly not right away. So when you start these, you do want to know, who can I call if something goes wrong, if I can't continue, to come and get me. It's not a Gran Fondo where you can just wait for the sweep wagon to come by. If you are riding at night. So most of our rides actually are not at night. It's really only when you get past the sort of 300-kilometer level that you start getting into night riding. You need to have a reflective vest, so I'm wearing one that is good. Just reflective piping on your jersey, that's not good enough. We have a document that says what you need to have online in terms of the amount of reflectivity. You need to have reflective leg bands. So I should be having one on both my legs if I was actually going to be riding at night. And you need to have, which we have at the booth, you can join Rusa and get yourself a pair. And you need to have bright headlights and taillights attached to the bike. So, taillights, the blinky, the cheap little blinky, that can really annoy people who are riding behind you. You want to have something that is nice and solid.
Not pointing at their face.
Probably not spinning my wheel enough, but they do work. Dynamos are really popular, but you don't need to have a dynamo. Battery lights are really getting pretty impressive. And a lot of times the rides will start maybe a little before sundown or before sunup, and you can expect to finish a little after sundown. So you don't necessarily need to have lights the entire time. But if your lights do start to go, that could be the end of your ride. We are really strict about you cannot be riding at night without the reflective vest and the lights. The headlight needs to be bright enough to illuminate the road. So again, this is not for like city riding where you just have the little blinky. It needs to be a fairly bright light. But these are all things you can add to any bike. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Emily.
Yeah, so if you go upstairs to Rando Alley, there's a bunch of really, really gorgeous custom bikes and steel bikes and really purpose-built bikes. And those are fantastic, but that is not, you don't have to have a bike like that to ride a long time. The most important thing is that you have a comfortable bike that you feel good about sitting on for a really long time. We think of a lot of, 200K is not much more than a century. A 300K is the next step after that. That's close to a double century. And so you could be sitting on your bike for a pretty long time. And if you have a bike that you can sit on for that long, then it's not that hard to attach everything to it that you need to get you through the ride. Of course, if you really decide that that's the way you want to go, there's great custom options for the frame for every component on it that are purpose-built for Randonneuring. But there's also lots of great ways to do that without having to buy a whole bunch of custom stuff. And if you look around what people are actually riding at the start of a ride, there's a huge variety, and some of them are off-the-shelf road bikes, and some of them are gravel bikes or cross bikes or fat bikes. And some of them are custom Randonneuring bikes and everything else in between. So is this going to reach? Just to quickly show you here, this is not my only Randonneuring bike, but my favorite Randonneuring bike. At a glance from a distance, it kind of looks like, oh yeah, that's a classic steel bike with all the Randonneuring stuff on it. That's a real Rando bike. But if you take a closer look, it's actually not. This is a vintage frame, but it really was a racing frame, and it doesn't have eyelets for fenders. So I've got these fenders that are attached with a zip tie thing in the back, and the front ones have a fender mount that goes through the skewer. As long as you've got some place to put your lights, that's great, and there's lots of options for doing that. The back one is just attached around the chainstay. The front one is at the fork crown. Nowadays, there's a ton of different kinds of bike packing gear. I make bike gear also to strap your stuff onto your bike so you don't have to carry it in a backpack. You just need to be able to carry whatever clothing layers you might need to put on or take off. And the temperature can vary quite a bit between noon and midnight. And however much food and water and tools and stuff you're going to need for the longest stretches you need to go. But other than that, there's not one type of Randonneuring bike. There's kind of a classic image of a Randonneuring bike, but you don't have to have that to show up to your first ride or even to your 50th ride. And as you go, you kind of find out which of those classic Randonneuring things you look really good to you, or you really want, or you really need. Maybe by then somebody will have invented something amazing and you'll want that. But come on the bike that you have, figure out what you need to carry your stuff on it, put your lights on it, and it'll be a great Randonneuring bike.
Awesome. Sweet. So we're all inspired. We all got bikes, right? So how do we get into this thing? I think we want to make this as simple as possible. That's why we're here. If you are in the U.S., I think your first step would be to visit rusa.org. So that way you can find a local club. So how this thing works, right, is that RUSA is like the big sort of oversight. And then, as Deb mentioned, there's all these different regions and chapters. So you ride with your local club. I'm in San Francisco. I ride with the San Francisco Randonneurs. That said, I can go to Davis and enjoy one of Deb's rides. Totally great. So you find your local club. You ride with them. Sometimes there's a fee. I mean, we're not talking big bucks here. I think it's, $30 to join RUSA? And then I think it was like $10 to join the San Francisco Randonneurs. So it's very affordable. And once you kind of clear all those membership sort of purchases, boom, you're ready to go. Go do your first ride. So now, let's pretend we've done all the things. Now we're kind of like, okay, well, what should I do? Like, jumping into a 1200 might be slightly aggressive. So start with 100K. First off, I think it's great because, I get it. 62 miles is still not nothing, but it's a great day out. It's a super fun time, and it'll get you used to some of the parameters of Randonneuring, right? Like, okay, I gotta load the route, I have to follow the route, I have to go through a control, all that sort of stuff. And it'll just kind of get you more into the vibe of what the sport is. If you aren't ready for that distance, or maybe you just can't do that ride, the other important part of Randonneuring is volunteering. This is a volunteer-run organization, and so all of the Randonneur events have volunteers. There's someone at the start that will mark you in, right? There's someone at the end that will take your time. So joining the club is one thing. Volunteering with the club, I think, is really where you become a part of it and you get more into the fabric of this community. And that's really the best way to sort of get to know the club and get to know the new members.
So all this kind of begs the question, why are we doing this? You've heard Sufferfest thrown out there. You've heard about riding at nighttime and riding in the rain. And if you're talking to the average sane person, you're going to say, that's pretty stupid. Why not wait for a nice day and ride in nice weather? I think the answer to that question really boils down to really boils down to a couple of things, which is the idea that, there's an old saying that ships are safe in the harbor, but that's not what ships are made for. It also boils down to this idea that there's some trait, in my opinion, in humanity that led people to, walk out of sub-Saharan Africa and conquer the world, that led people to climb to the top of Everest and to just literally go as far as they could, even to the moon. That desire to explore, to go further, to do more, I think that this sport touches on that. So this is not about necessarily just riding the bike. It's about that experience of going beyond what your expectations were, going beyond what you thought your limits were, and figuring out a way to make it work. So there's a couple of things I would add to that. One of them is you don't grow in your comfort zone. The place where you find growth, the place where you learn about yourself, the place where you experience that personal growth is when you find yourself in a situation that is a little bit beyond that you're used to, that you have to adjust, that you have to find a way to adapt, and ideally to overcome. And sometimes you may not work out. I mean, there's been DNFs. A DNF is a do not finish. There's certainly been rides that I've done that I have not finished, and I frankly learned more from those than the ones that I have. And I've said to many people, and this is true, that if this were easy, I'd have stopped a long time ago. What that challenge, that willingness to go further, to test yourself, is what this is about. This is why it's self-sufficient. This is why the camaraderie in my mind kicks in, because when you do an event with like-minded people, they want you to succeed as much as they want themselves to succeed. Okay, and you may not ride with them for the entire ride, but when you're hitting a low point and someone comes along and gives you that moral boost, that physical boost, that assistance with a flat tire, you remember that. It means something more than that little act. And those little acts of kindness, those little acts of camaraderie is what really sort of keeps bringing people back. It's one of the inherent aspects of this sport. This is a sport about discovery about yourself and about new places. One of the benefits of Randonneuring is that you have the opportunity to ride on curated courses. If you go out to California or to New England, the folks there are riders. They know the best roads. They've chosen a course to sort of put on the best opportunity for you to see what they have to offer. So you get this curated experience while sharing it with like-minded people. And Lisa mentioned the fact that it's a grassroots organization, and to me, or a volunteer organization. And to me, that grassroots aspect is another thing that keeps me coming back, because we're not talking about people. We're not up here because we're going to get rich off of this. Okay, the $30 to membership is barely covering the costs for the insurance and for the events that go on. The events no one's getting rich off of this. The people that are putting it on are putting on for a love of the sport. The people that are participating for love of the sport. And then what that means for you as the rider and for you as the volunteer is you're getting a level of enthusiasm that you don't get with some arm's length transaction where you're just spending money to show up and ride. The old definition for amateur was somebody who did something for the love of the sport. And that's what applies here. People are doing it for the love of the sport. The inside of Randonneuring, do you mind if I just jump on?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So basically, this is supposed to be about training. And I kind of chose this slide, eat, sleep, and ride, because those are the three things you have to train for, right? And there are books that are written on each one of these subjects. There's YouTube courses on each one of these subjects. I'm not going to pretend to try to cover them all here. What I will say is this, is that you have to plan for the event, but you also have to be willing to change that plan. I don't think any Randonneuring plan survives contact with the course, at least not intact, okay? You're gonna go there thinking you're gonna do one thing, and it turns out that, it starts raining, you've got a flat tire, you're bonking because you didn't eat enough, and if you can't adapt and overcome, you're going to have a problem. So you do want to have a plan, but you also want to be flexible enough to work to change that plan to fit the circumstances. to me, knowing the three factors, eating, sleeping, and riding, and understanding that each one of those is its own challenge is something that's going to help you as you figure out what works for you. What is your nutrition strategy going to be? What is your sleep strategy going to be? And for the longer rides, sleeping is just as important as riding, because lack of sleep can be as much of a ride ender as a complete mechanical failure. Your ride pace, they talked about the time limits. The time limit is generous, but it is unrelenting. If the longer you stop, the more that line is going to come catch up to you. Now, if you don't remember that or take that into account, you're going to find yourself out of time, and if you don't have time, you can't stop, and if you can't stop, you can't eat, and if you can't stop, you can't sleep, and if you can't sleep and you can't eat, you can't ride. So you have to plan for all three, and the longer the ride, the more that becomes important. The thing that balances out, though, which makes it something that is also an interesting challenge in my mind, is that it's not just about the physicality of it. If you look at a group of randonneurs, they're not going to jump out at you. You're not going to say, oh, look at that person. They're like, this thin and super young. It's a mental game, okay? And if you can plan, if you can strategize, if you know your limits, if you know what you're capable of, and you plan accordingly, you'd be amazed what you can accomplish. And that is what Randonneuring certainly demonstrates. And I'm up again. All right, we talked about this before. What is Randonneurs USA? It's been covered. I'll just go say that. I want to add to that it's nationally organized, but it's locally run. And what I mean by that is that the RBAs, the regional brevet administrators, such as Jake and Deb, they put on the rides for the people that come to their communities to put those rides on. And the thing that's a positive about that is that every ride has a local flavor to it. They know the roads, they know the regions, they know how to show you the best of what that region has to offer. The national organization is more of a liaison between the individual regions and with friends to get the results turned in, but the place where Randonneuring happens is at the local level. So that is a huge plus. It also gives the participants a really good opportunity to experience different types of it. So locally, for example, if you're from this area, I'm very familiar with Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Pennsylvania rides are notoriously difficult, okay? They are very, very hill-focused. You have to be good in hills, you have to be a strong rider to successfully complete that. That's not going to change, right? New Jersey, on the other hand, offers a wider range of rides, so that if you want to sort of try out the distance without the climbs, they may offer some flatter rides, which gives you that opportunity to maybe get the distance done without the extra climbing. There are people who want a bigger challenge of the hills and the time and the distance. There are some people who want to take it one part at a time. And because the events are run locally, there is an opportunity for you to find a ride that meets you where you are. Which goes right into this one. I don't know, I was doing the monologue here. All right, so basically how to get involved. RUSA.org is a place to start. Look for you can do a search under rides that is based on your geography, so you can look for rides within a particular start area, thanks in part to Jake and his Ride Finder. And then from there, you can decide what it is you want to do, which ride suits your need at that particular time. Nationally, once you become a member of Randonneurs USA, we are always looking for volunteers, and we rely on the talents and the goodwill of the people who join us. There's a lot of very talented, very driven people in this sport. You can probably imagine why, because it takes drive, it takes talent, it takes that commitment to even complete a 200K. So when you get a group of people like that together, you get a wide breadth of talent with that one common thread. If you've got something to offer, we're here to, offer it. We will find a place for you to share that skill, to share that talent, and we're always looking for volunteers. All right.
And I think I'll just add in this one, you know, if you're kind of curious and how does this look, there's also a lot of people on social media that make a bunch of really cool content. There's folks on YouTube. I think the Bike Farmer, he does some really neat videos. I'm going to plug my own Instagram because I do a lot of that stuff. But it's just another way to sort of see into this world, because I think it can get a little bit like curious. So if you are curious about it, poke around a little bit. There is lots of content out there.
Plus, we have our YouTube videos.
And then, yeah, we have a YouTube channel. So there you go. And then,
How do you get connected, you guys?
Well, the easiest way, again, starts with rusa.org, rusa.org. That is really the sort of the central clearinghouse to get in touch with all of the regions across the country. Upstairs at the table, we do have a list of local, when I say local, everything from DC all the way up to New England. So basically, regions that you can get to from this location within a half a day's drive, you know, a couple hours drive, what's around this immediate vicinity. Almost every region has a website where they'll have their rides posted, so you can look at the national page, the rusa.org, or you can look at the individual sites to get a more precise ride description for the events that are coming up. Right now, it's a year-round sport, but the real heart of it sort of begins in the spring and continues till about October-ish. So right now we're at the real early stages. Rides, there's a ride next weekend in Pennsylvania. On Saturday, there's rides starting in April in New Jersey. So the rides are really starting to pick up now. There was discussion about Paris Best Paris, and it's 1,200K or 750 miles. To qualify for that, you have to be able to ride, you have to complete a 200, a 300, a 400, and a 600. That's called a full series. Most regions offer a full series, so if that's something that's a goal of yours, even just to do the series, much less to prepare for 1,200, then you would look to see what's on that schedule, and you can kind of do a la carte. You can do a ride in New England and a ride in Pennsylvania, a ride in New Jersey. As long as you hit those numbers within the time frame, then you're good to go.
I'm just going to jump in and say, in California, there is a Randonneuring event every single weekend. We have better weather, right? So we can do it. But that doesn't preclude people from coming out and
That's
riding
true.
with us.
Yeah.
So you can ride year-round if you so choose. I'll also just jump in and say that one of the newest aspects of Randonneuring is the gravel program. And Dawn and myself and Jake and Emily and others have been working on bringing gravel into Randonneuring. There are many, many, many more people that don't want to share the road with vehicles, and being off-road makes them feel a lot more comfortable. And with proof of passage that's electronic, we don't have to have these controls out in the middle of nowhere that says take a picture of the hay bale by the, cow watering place. So it's a lot more interesting, and it creates a whole different thing, because I might create a route in Davis and we'll run it next week, and in 3 weeks from now it'll have rained, etc., and the route will have changed. The roads are the same, but the roads are different, right, because of the weather, etc. So it provides a whole nother round of challenge, which we think is really interesting and can bring in a whole nother kind of subset of folks that are interested in something different.
Can I jump in really quick with, so this is something that I think we probably should have clarified and haven't yet. The standard Randonneuring distances after the 100K and their time limits are 200K is 13 and a half hours, a 300K is 20 hours, a 400K, which is about 250 miles, that's 27 hours, and a 600K is 40 hours. So the minimum speed for these is roughly around 10 miles an hour-ish. It's not superhumanly fast. If you're going close to that minimum, you can't stop very much because the clock doesn't stop when you stop. But those are the time limits, and those are the distances that we tend to most of the time be talking about. 1,000 Ks are 75 hours and 1,200 Ks are 90 hours. So those are kind of the time frames and the distances that we're usually discussing.
So what that means, and I'll jump on that just very quickly, is that there's a sort of a sweet spot for speed. If you can average 12 and a half miles per hour, you've got enough time to eat, you've got enough time to sleep. If you go slower than that, you've got time, but less. If you can go faster than that, you've got more time to not be moving. So it's not required but that's a good sort of reference point as to what your average speed should be. The one caveat I would put on that is don't trust those bike computers that stop the clock when you stop.
Oh, yeah.
It's got to keep going, okay? Because you'd be surprised, just waiting for a light to turn red can drop your average speed by 0.2, 0.3. You're just watching it go down, so.
Yeah. I think that's it.
Questions?
I just want to, we'll take questions, just a second, go back one. We have there's so many things we discussed right now, and I want to point everyone, we have a booth, 3104. What we have at the booth is a lot of references. I brought some here. We have this great informational card with a QR code that takes you to about 6 different sites. So if you want this is a great resource to take with you as well. We also have some great previous journals of American Randonneurs. So I want to point you guys to our booth. We're running a special right now to join Randonneurs USA from today till next Saturday, $5 off. So a membership for an individual is $25. So come on and join us. And then you get some really cool swag, some ankle bands, some pins and things like that. So we're going to take questions now. So we'll open up the floor for questions.
Go ahead.
Yep.
Just curious, does the clock stop if you're sleeping?
No.
No, clock never stops.
No.
Quick second question. My phone wouldn't last more than 5-6 hours for stamping. What happens then?
You get a battery or figure it out.
There's no physical standing alternative.
No, some people carry an extra battery. Some people use a sine wave or some other form of way to charge their battery while they're riding during the day. So at night when they need their lights, then their lights are being used and their battery is topped out.
But just to be clear, it depends on regions though, because for example, Pennsylvania still uses cards in conjunction with electronic proof of passage, right? So there can be a regional difference. If you have a brevet card, then your biggest concern is keeping it dry. Okay, which can be an issue in more ways than one. So if you have a brevet card, if you're at a region that has a card, then you can get the stamps. And the way that works is that basically you go to a location like a store, convenience store that you have to check in, and you either get a receipt or you have them sign it. It'll be explained to you by the local person, but there are options for that. So electronic proof of passage, you do need to have a power supply that lasts long enough. Brevet cards, you don't.
And if you put your phone in airplane mode, it'll last a whole lot longer. And use a mode, put your screen brightness way down, use a mode that doesn't turn your screen on when you need, and more than you need to. I can usually get well over a 200K out of my phone if I don't touch it other than for navigation, so.
Question?
Thank you so much.
For the very long distance, is there a place available to sleep?
Yep, yeah, that's a good question. Do you want to?
Carry a sleeping bag or a tent or a pillow?
Yeah, you don't carry a sleeping bag or a tent for the longer distances. Usually, some people do. Most people don't. For 600 Ks and up, generally, there's some sort of sleeping accommodation provided. It might be a cot on the floor. It might be a motel room. In a few cases, you're on your own to make your own arrangements, and there might be a suggested motel room on the route. The longer 1,200 Ks usually have designated sleep stops, so you don't have to carry around a sleeping bag, and a lot of those will have a drop bag support at those controls. That's not universally true. Every region does things slightly differently in that regard.
Take your blanket or whatever.
Well,
Yeah.
well, you won't. Yeah, or your clean clothes or something.
It's
Yeah.
not a truck though. It's volunteers. So
Yeah, it's the back of the organizer's hatchback. Yeah, but. Yeah, yeah, they'll tell you what's provided.
Yeah, again, it all goes back to how that particular region, that local region wants to run it. But questions about sleeping, I've gotten that a few times upstairs. Typically, when there's a ride involving a sleep stop, there's some explanation, some accommodation that's explained to you, okay? So either it's going to be a designated hotel or motel or gymnasium or whatever the case may be. Whether you stay there or not is up to you. You can make your own arrangements if you want to, but typically the ride organizers will have something, an option that's readily available for you to use.
And 400 Ks and shorter, you don't You don't sleep. I mean, a 400K is usually, most people, it's a little under 24 hours.
And then there's the ditch nap, which we haven't talked
Or
about.
the post office nap.
I think we have a question here. Yeah.
Two questions, actually. First was, can you have someone meet you at the checkpoints with gear?
Yes.
Yeah, can do that, and
Only.
Only at a checkpoint.
Only at the
checkpoint.
checkpoints.
Yeah, and because I have two friends that did PvP, they both told me they fell asleep on their bikes. Have any of you ever experienced that?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah,
I think.
one said he ran off the road and
Yeah.
Jocelyn woke him up.
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
other one, his chin hit his aero bars and he woke up.
Yeah.
Well, that goes back to what I was saying before, that sleep is one of the things that's the
Managing
planning
your
thing. So it is entirely possible for somebody to push themselves to the point of falling asleep on the bike, and that is also entirely avoidable, right? So can it happen? Absolutely. I've known about that happening, but you don't fall asleep accidentally. You know you're getting drowsy. You know your eyelids are getting heavy. You know your eyes are starting to cross. The question is, are you smart enough to do something about it, or do you continue riding? So we want you to be smart
I'll
enough
add
to do
to that.
something about it.
I mean, so I did my first PvP, whatever it was, 2023, and to train for it, I actually did a weekend block of training where I did, 10 or 12 hours. I only slept for 4 hours, and then I did another 10 hours, slept 4, and then another 6. And that was like a big weekend build for me. And part of it was training my sleep schedule. So because I knew going into PvP, I'd probably sleep around 3 or around 4, maybe 5 hours a night. And so if you do that in a controlled situation, like my own weekend where I knew I was going back to this hotel, then you kind of get a bit used to it, or at least you have a better feeling of what your body is going to go through. So I would really encourage riders to sort of prepare themselves with controlled situations like that. I think people that might not have done that and just kind of send it at PvP, you can see when people aren't used to either the fatigue of multiple day long rides or the fatigue, physical sleep fatigue that can come over you.
Yeah.
When it comes to eating, sleeping, riding, what is the allowed, what is the scope of free game in terms of, how far off path you can go?
Oh,
you can go as-
You can go anywhere you want.
I just to illustrate more broadly what I'm asking, I understand that you can, it seems like you can set up sleep wherever you like. Can you go into a Walmart of your choosing?
Yes.
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's really all free game.
Here's
Yeah.
the thing. Whenever you leave the route that an RBA has created, let's say you want to go to the Walmart and it's a mile off the route. You got to go off, but you got to come back exactly where you went off. You can't go and kind of come up
Cut the route.
forward.
Yeah.
We call that cutting the route, and you can get disqualified for that. So you can go wherever you want,
Yeah.
but you got to come back to the route exactly where you left it.
You can
and
go
then
to Walmart, you can watch a movie, you
Yeah.
can take a nap. I mean, you can do whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As long as it's not.
But that clock is not going to stop because you're watching a movie, So,
So-
it's the one sort of mental picture that someone once drew that I find very helpful is like imagine when you start, there's a line that's going along the course at the max minimum speed. So 9.5 miles per hour is 13 and a half hours. That line is going to keep going at 13 and a half, 9.5 miles per hour. You can do whatever you want as long as you're ahead of that line. You can stop, eat, nap, use the bathroom, chat with your friends, change your flat tire, anything you want to do,
shopping.
as long as you stay ahead of that line.
I think getting kind of more to your question, because you were asking about outside help, is you can't prearrange for your friends to meet you at places that are not controls, and you can't have your friends kind of show up, prearranged to have your friends show up on the ride and give you the pull in the hard part.
In the middle of the night, right?
Yeah, and you can't be like, my friend lives on the route, I'm going to prearrange that I'm going to go sleep at, get some extra help at their house. But anything that's like a public store that's open to anybody who's on the ride, or like, we sometimes jokingly refer to that as eating off the land.
roadkill.
Yeah, you can go to a restaurant, you can go to a gas station, you can eat wherever you want. That's a public facility. You're welcome to do that. You just can't have extra help from your friends that you prearrange that's not open to everybody unless it's at the designated spots.
Okay, I think we have one over there. Yeah.
A few over here.
Okay.
Just thinking about routes, I'm wondering if there's any commonalities in the way that they are,
Do you want to?
built, thinking shoulder of the road.
Yeah, I mean, it really is, each region is going to work differently. So the way the route is designed in Iowa is probably going to be different than it is in Vermont. We all try really hard to come up with as safe as a route, basically as low traffic, and think about turns. Everyone that designs these is a rider themselves, and they're all sort of thinking about what type of route would they want to ride. The distances are such that there's definitely times at which it's kind of unavoidable to have a busier road than you otherwise would want. We think about a lot about at night riding. Okay, maybe you're going to trade. You're going to be on a slightly busier road because, it's going to pass stores or other things you need. Sometimes navigation at night on really, really dark roads is kind of difficult. So I'd say the commonality is just that they're all routes that are designed by active cyclists who are riding these, and with an eye to safety and to comfort. As an organizer, you're really also thinking, okay, I need a route that's going to work really well for the rider who's going to take the full 40-hour time limit, and also for the rider that's going to be extremely strong and be done in 25 hours for 600K.
And I would just add on to that everything he said I agree with. You mentioned shoulders specifically, and I understand that 100%, but the fact is that there are some really quiet roads with no shoulders that I'd rather be on than be on a busy road with a shoulder. I don't like to have a truck driving past me 55 miles per hour while I'm on a shoulder, and if I have a tertiary road that goes from no place to no place, no one uses it, and there's no shoulder, I'd much rather be there. So those kind of things come into play. I also think it's important to point out that these are open roads that's open to traffic, and as try as we can, you need to have a comfort level riding on roads. Okay, this is not a situation for people who don't want to be near cars, unfortunately, because that's just not possible.
There's a few questions
Over here. Yeah.
I understand it's very variable individually, but I was curious what sort of tricks or preferred snacks you guys have in terms of fueling and nutrition on these long rides.
Oh my God.
How much time do you have?
Well, hummingbird.
Can I plug my own stuff?
Let me just start. I eat yogurt, chocolate milk, and Fritos, and apples, and then sushi when I can. And then we have.
I don't do any of that. So yeah, no, I mean, I think that's also a big part of training for this, right? I don't think we got a lot into training because I know that's a very individual thing. And every randonneur is going to be different. Some just do the series and that's their training. I'm a little bit more structured, and so I like to train with the food I'm going to use on course, right? I like to put carbohydrates in my bottle because that to me is a consistent fueling. A lot of times you end up forgetting to eat, or it's 2 a.m. and you do not want to eat.
Or nothing's open.
Or, yeah, exactly, or that. And so I like to have carbs in my bottle. That's where, hummingbirdfuels.com, you can check it out. But it's just really simple. And then that way I've trained with it. I know my gut can take it. Everything's groovy. I don't know if anyone else has a
It really varies a lot, and some of us prefer to eat a big meal off the bike at stops when we can, and of course that depends on the route and what's available. You're probably not going to carry a steak dinner in your handlebar bag to stop and eat by the side of the road, but if I prefer to eat a big meal of regular food that's going to take me for a little longer. But, I like trail mix. I like having I usually like to have stuff in one bottle and a plain bottle in the other one. It's very individual. I used to do more bars and stuff, and I kind of prefer more regular food now, but you have to find what you like.
Yeah, I would just second that. I mean, I think that what works for you is going to work for you, and the way you figure that out is by doing the events and saying, okay, I want to try this, or based on whatever your experience is, because your eating plan may be completely different than my eating plan, and I know the guy who just left here, he does a powdered mix that's special for him because that's what he can keep down during long rides, right? Other people eat real food. So it's a spectrum. I was supposed to talk about training, but it's almost impossible to talk about something that's so individual on a broad scale basis. There's everything, especially when it comes to diet. You have everything from people who don't eat this to people who only eat that and whatever's in the middle. So you got to figure it out for yourself.
Yeah.
I just want to put a point in it too, and that is that whatever you think about your training for shorter distances is not going to work for longer distances. Your body changes, your chemistry changes, and so that's why it's important to practice. So you do your first 300K, that's not too bad, you're getting home at night, but when you do your first 600K, on day 2 of that 600K, your body is not doing what it did in mile 1 through 50. It's doing something really different, and you might need to fuel it differently. So that's where practice helps out a lot.
That being said, on the food issue, one last point, one quick last point.
No, go ahead.
All right, one more question.
How do you qualify for the PBP?
You have to do a
Best
series.
question ever. So, okay. Get excited, everybody. Now is the time. Yeah, no, I swear. But no, seriously, now is the time to start randonneuring. So Paris Brest Paris is like going to Mecca, right? It's the best thing you'll do on a bike, hands down. What you need to do, though, is you need to qualify. And it's actually kind of like a 2-year system. So this year, if you start randonneuring, now you're going to understand how it works, how to do controls, how to eat and sleep, and all the sort of things, right? You'll get very comfortable with the sport. Next year, 2026, the longest ride you do will be your qualifying, your opportunity to submit for your first time at PBP, like the actual, like I want to do the 90 hours or I want to do the 84 hours.
You can register earlier if you did a longer ride.
So it starts with the 1,200 kilometer rides, and then it goes down to 1,000 and a 600. So in 2026, if you do a 600 kilometer ride and you complete it within the time, then the opening for PBP will be sooner for the dude that did the 600 versus the person that did a 300, right?
You still have to do a whole series to qualify.
Well, yeah. So that's just 2026. So, okay, cool. We did a 600. We got our place.
1 year of qualifying rides.
Yeah.
You're laying out a great plan, but
You only need 1 year.
Yeah.
So when I did PVP the first time, I started Randonneuring in April. I went to Paris in August.
Me
I'm not
too.
saying that's a great plan.
I did
but
the
it
same. It was not.
And I did a series, and then I did another
But
300K, and then I went to Paris Brest Paris. I had an hour and 4 minutes of sleep or something stupid.
Yeah.
So not what I recommend, but doable.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doable.
But yeah, to answer the question, you do, and then in 2027, you'll do a Randonneur series, a 200, 300, 400, and 600. And you'll do all of that before June, when you will then get your ticket to go to Paris.
So you don't have to do 1,200?
No.
Talk to us more. We'll chat more.
What? A full series is a 2 through 6.
We'll chat.
2, 3, 4, and 6.
Two more questions
How about
over
the
here.
guy
Hold
in
on,
the back?
hold on. One more question.
It's worth pointing out that
Wait.
PBP has 6,000 people. So the person who signs up for does 1,000K the year before,
Yeah.
they may be able to get in the wave that starts at 5 p.m. The person who does 200K, they might be starting at 11 p.m.
Yeah. We'll come to us and we'll chat. We got 2 more questions here.
On those longer rides where you're going overnight and stuff, is it pretty safe to say that the way the lengths in a time like so you're not ever going to get like 7 or 8 hours of sleep?
If you're really fast, you can. There are people who do. That's not most people, but it happens for some people.
So it sounds like 4 hours is a more realistic sleep pattern.
I think, yeah.
It depends on how fast you
Yeah,
go.
some people don't. It's
Or 5 hours off the bike.
If you're off the bike for more than 4 hours, you're stiffening up. You need to get up and get back on your bike.
Yeah. Was there another question over here?
There was another question. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's clear you can't prearrange to have people help you, just individually on your own. Are you permitted to
So I ride in driftless Randonneurs in Wisconsin, and some of the parts of Wisconsin, because I ride a fat bike and I'm really slow on that, and some of the controls will close. So some of that is coordinating. I will go the day before and at that control drop off water and stuff, knowing if I don't make it, it's still at the control site, but it's because I need, preset, so yeah. That,
If you're going to do that, you have to do it at the control.
yes, it can't be anywhere else. And I can't get help from my spouse, like, on the route. It has to be but I've done that before myself to have food. One time, I went to a control right next to a cemetery, and I'm like, oh, no one's going to find my bag. So I went the day before, and I hid my bag. I get there at 3 in the morning, my bag was gone. Someone took my bag, and then so I had a DNF, because I'm like, all right. Anyways, but any other questions? Yep, go ahead.
So, do people make a plan to ride together?
Yes. Some people don't. Not everybody.
No, I understand.
One thing that I want to plug really quick is if you're looking to get started in randonneuring and you're a little nervous about going for a long time and riding by yourself and riding overnight, a great first event is a Flesh, which we didn't talk about very much, but it's a team event, and it's 24 hours with a group that has to ride together for the rules of the ride, and it has to take 24 hours and not more and not less. So it's a really great first Randonneuring event and a first time for riding through the night if you're worried about that, because you know you're going to be with people.
Here's that question over here.
So I live in a part of the country that is like a big gaping hole for this activity. Nothing in Oklahoma, Arkansas, Mexico, So is National doing anything about that? Like trying to encourage?
Yeah, where regions don't exist and you're interested in it, there is a way to create a region, and that's really a longer conversation we have now, but it includes working with the board of RUSA and getting people that are interested, and then working with maybe an adjacent RVA, like who is the closest region to the gaping hole that you want to try to fill, and then you can work on getting some rides going and getting some energy up, and et cetera, and before you know it, you're running a lot of events.
Yeah, there actually were regions in New Mexico and Oklahoma and a couple of those areas, and the organizers sort of stepped down and no one took their place, but we have the ability to reactivate those if there is someone who's interested in stepping up and being an organizer. So it's an all volunteer organization. If you want to be involved, the board can help you out.
Yeah.
Are you allowed to draft? You're all right.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
God, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Everything sounds like it's individualized.
Yeah, I don't know.
No, you can totally draft and you can ride with your friends if they're on the ride.
Yeah. The only problem is no one wants to pull. That's the problem.
You can't all draft each other.
You mentioned gravel. Will you increase the times?
Yes.
A little bit.
It depends. If it's so ACP, Audax Club Parisienne, who runs Paris Press Paris and runs all these qualifying rides, they are very strict. 200K is 13 and a half hours, not a minute more or less. Now, RUSA, Randonneurs USA, has its own subset of rides, 200Ks, et cetera, and anybody can ride them, and gravel rides fall into that because we were successful in getting more time for gravel. So for every mile of gravel, you get an extra minute of time. And so let's say the ride has, 17 miles of gravel, and it's 100K, so it's whatever that time is. I know, Jake, you can do that math, I can't. Plus, there's 17 minutes, and that is your total time. It doesn't work if you're trying to qualify for Paris Press Paris or 1200K locally, but it does work for like another set of trinkets and routes that RUSA runs.
And that's relatively new, right?
It is, 2-3 years.
wanted to do this
Yeah.
20 years ago.
Yeah. No, we've been working on this program this is the 3rd year.
And there's no variation for particularly mountainous gravel.
No.
No, can't control for that.
Well, there isn't, at this point, there's nothing for climbing per se, but yeah.
If you've got a 400K that has,
Yeah.
that's flat as opposed to one that has.
No, same time.
10,000 feet of climbing.
Same
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
So yeah, going off the whole whole gravel theme.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yay.
Have you guys looked at also incorporating some of the rail trail areas where you already have
Yes.
limestone piece? Because I tell you what, I can speed that whole gap thing if you guys got around.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm running a 1,200 kilometer bike ride in September, and I made sure that there's gravel in it, and we're doing the Biz Johnson Trail up in outside of Susanville, California. And I specifically revamped the whole thing for that added time. I think rail to trails are fantastic, and anytime we can get them built into a route.
There's a few routes, like I did one you can start, if you want to do Midwest riding, you can dip your rear tire in Lake Michigan and go across the state to Minnesota and dip your front tire in the Mississippi, and mostly rail to trail. So it's route development, we can talk about that, but there's a lot of opportunities. There's ones on the coast of California that they do as well.
Just bring a bivvy.
Yeah, or yeah, so, yeah. Any other questions? No. Well, thank you guys, thanks for your time, thank you.